Hi, my name is Yazan Ibrahim, also known as Yazan Abu Ghosh. Today we will take about 1.7 sampling methodology. When it comes to audits, there's a constant balancing act between being thorough and being efficient. Think of an IS auditor, that's Information Systems Auditor, as a detective combing through an organization's complex maze of data, systems, and controls. But here's the problem. The auditor often doesn't have the time or resources to investigate every single transaction, user behavior, or system change. And that's where the art and science of sampling comes in, a critical methodology that allows them to uncover big truths from small numbers. At its core, audit sampling is the process of selecting a subset of data, a sample, from a much larger set or population. The idea is simple. By carefully analyzing the sample, an auditor can make informed conclusions about the entire population. But here's the catch. This conclusion is only as solid as the sampling technique used. Missteps in sampling could mean drawing the wrong conclusions, either unjustly condemning clean data or giving a free pass to critical weaknesses. So let's dive deeper into how sampling works, its purpose, and how it's used in audits. Why sample? Diving into audit objectives. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of sampling, let's talk about why auditing even involves sampling. When an organization is being audited, the goal is to evaluate how well its controls are working or whether its financial or operational data holds up to scrutiny. This is where the purpose of the test comes into play. Auditors primarily perform two types of procedures: compliance testing and substantive testing. Compliance testing checks if the organization is playing by its own rules. For example, is there a policy to approve system changes? Are users given access privileges cautiously, or is access granted without proper procedures? Here, the focus is on controls. Are they in place and functioning as designed? Think of compliance testing like a road safety inspector checking whether cars on the freeway are following the speed limit, ensuring there's no reckless driving. Meanwhile, substantive testing focuses on the actual content, digging into the nitty-gritty to spot errors or inaccuracies. This is where auditors look for evidence that backs up financial statements or data. Suppose there's a balance sheet number that looks suspicious. Substantive testing ensures that the number isn't just some sophisticated fiction, it's backed by real valid transactions. Essentially, it's about verifying accuracy, completeness, and integrity. The two approaches work hand in hand. Strong compliance controls can reduce the amount of substantive testing needed, while weak controls may make auditors dig deeper into the data. Imagine this relationship like a trust check. If the locks on the organization's systems are sound, the auditor doesn't need to scrutinize each and every transaction. But if those locks look shabby or absent, deeper investigation through substantive testing becomes essential. How compliance testing differs from substantive testing. Let's go a bit deeper. Compliance testing focuses on answering the question, are the gates keeping intruders out? Are the locks working as expected? For example, if an organization has a control stating that only authorized personnel can modify production programs, a compliance test might involve checking a sample of programs to confirm if the source and object files match. This isn't about finding monetary errors, it's about determining whether the safeguard is doing its job. Is there evidence, whether electronic or paper-based, that supports this? On the other hand, substantive testing is far more granular. Think of it as checking not only whether gates exist, but whether what's behind them is in order. Is the financial or operational data legitimate? Is it complete? One way auditors do this is by analyzing transactions. For example, they may select a sample of financial entries to test whether monetary amounts are accurate and tie back to supporting documentation. That's where sampling, whether statistical or non-statistical, plays an essential role. Statistical versus non-statistical sampling, science meets judgment. Now let's break down the two broader approaches to sampling, statistical and non-statistical. The distinction between them lies in whether you rely on hard math or professional judgment. 1. Statistical sampling. This is the hardcore math-driven approach. Using probability and statistics, auditors calculate precise sample sizes, select items to inspect, evaluate results, and ultimately make conclusions about the population as a whole. What makes statistical sampling powerful is its ability to quantify risk, to express how confident the auditor is in the conclusion drawn. For instance, the confidence coefficient represents the percentage likelihood that the sample reflects the larger population. A common confidence level is 95%, which means you're willing to tolerate a 5% chance that your sample doesn't quite represent reality. With these calculations, auditors can fine-tune their level of precision. Need high confidence and low error rates? Be ready to pull a large sample size. Less precision? Then a smaller sample might suffice. While mathematical rigor makes statistical sampling highly reliable, it's not always used. It isn't always practical or necessary. 2. Non-statistical sampling. Here, experience and intuition guide the auditor. Samples are chosen based on professional judgment. Transactions that seem riskier or more material are prioritized. While this method isn't mathematical, it's still systematic and rational. Auditors look at the sample that's most likely to yield useful insights. But there's a trade-off here. This method can't quantify how representative the sample is, leaving more room for potential bias. Both approaches have their place, and the choice depends on the audit's objectives. Are you working with limited resources? Go judgmental? Need precision and objectivity? Break out the statistical tools. Broad techniques, attribute sampling versus variable sampling. Within these approaches, auditors employ different sampling techniques depending on whether they're testing compliance or substantive data. Attribute sampling is a staple of compliance testing. This method answers the question, how often does something happen? For instance, how often are access request forms missing an approval signature? It's all about the presence or absence of an attribute, focusing on incidence rates. Even within attribute sampling, there are specialized techniques. Stop or go sampling. Think of this as a fast exit. When testing suggests a population has few errors, this method lets the auditor stop sampling early if nothing alarming shows up. Discovery sampling. This method actively seeks red flags, fraud, or major irregularities, making it ideal for uncovering hidden problems. Variable sampling is primarily used for substantive testing, where values or measurements in the population matter. Instead of asking how many, variable sampling asks how much or how different. Taking sampling into the field. At every stage of sampling, risks loom. Sampling naturally introduces the possibility of errors, since conclusions are based on only a subset of data. Two major risks stand out here. Incorrect acceptance. This happens when a population is flagged as compliant or error-free when, in reality, major issues exist. Incorrect rejection. Conversely, this is when valid sound data is unjustly flagged as faulty or weak. An auditor's aim is to minimize these risks while maximizing confidence in their conclusions. And this is why sampling isn't just about picking items randomly. It's a careful process of balancing cost, time, and resources against the need for accuracy. In summary, audit sampling is a vital tool, one that allows auditors to zoom in on the essential and zoom out with confidence. Through a mix of statistics, professional judgment, and experience, they uncover insights that help organizations improve controls, verify data, and steer clear of risks. So the next time you hear the word sampling, remember, it's not about cutting corners. It's about spotlighting the truth with efficiency and precision. Thank you for watching, and as always, continue learning. Stay curious, and we'll see you next video.